Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everyone's doing well today. If we could start with some green check marks, make sure everyone's with me, everything's working, and then I will let you know kind of what we're going to do for the next few days. I mentioned that we would start reviewing, and that's kind of what I want to do. I know we have an hour and a bit today, so we have plenty of time, and I'm kind of hesitant to do a bunch of questions and go through solutions because I don't want you guys to kind of sit there and take in information anymore. It's kind of up to you to be a little bit more proactive now and start reviewing and figuring out what you need to know and stuff like that. So, Ava, I don't know if we have English after math, but I can find out in the next hour. So before the class is done, I will let you know if you have English or not. We'll probably take a bit of a break sometime in the middle of the block and I can go check. Avery says no. We can go with that. I'll confirm that 100%. ADC today. Perfect. Thanks, Shayna. Okay. We're on the right track then. Cool. All right. Looks like we have check marks. Looks like almost everybody's here today too, which is awesome. And I want to mention a few things. We've tentatively booked. I know it's crazy that we should have a final exam date, but your provincial exam is likely going to be Wednesday. Grab my little calendar here. Wednesday the 27th at 1 o'clock. And that is the date that they've picked. So I think your English exam is on Tuesday at 9, and your math exam will be on the following day, the Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So it'll be in the afternoon. We're just trying to get it out of the administration what day it's going to be and what time. That's the time they've said, hey, it looks like it's going to be on Wednesday at 1. So we're going to go with that until I hear otherwise. And again, I kind of feel bad for you guys that we don't have a for sure date set, but it is what it is. So tentatively the 27th, 1 o'clock. As soon as I find out for sure, I'll put it into the course. We'll put it on the front page and we'll send out an email to everyone so everyone's kind of aware of when that provincial is. One other thing about the provincial exam, I was just talking to Mrs. Wood this morning about the date and things like that, and this actually came up yesterday. I think it was Taylor emailed me, hey Mr. Bourne, can you send me my grade? And I'm like, oh, I forgot to tell you guys. There were some settings I changed in the grade book. So if you go into Moodle, the course, and you go into the grade book now, at the very bottom of the page your grade should appear. Before it was set up that if there was something hidden, your grade wouldn't appear. I don't know. It was a weird setting. I think I fixed it. Taylor said she could see your grade. So if you want to know kind of where you're at right now, then you could go into your course, go into the grades on the side, and down at the very bottom of the page, it should say your final percentage. We still have another midterm to add to that and some more marks, so it's not finalized. But assuming you're all caught up, and everything's done up to this point, then it's going to be pretty close to where you're going to be going into this provincial exam. Now that being said, if you go into the exam with 50%, as an example, if you got 50% on the exam, you'd pass the course. If you go into the provincial with like 49% and you get 49% on the exam, you fail the course. So if you were to go into the exam with like 40%, all of a sudden you need to get 90% on the exam to pass the course, and that's a lot of work. So if you're not at 50% or really close to 50% going into the exam, then there's a very limited likelihood that you're going to, I shouldn't say that. If you're below like 40%, you go into the exam, you're not going to get like 100% on the exam and then pass the course. I mean, it happens, it's possible, but that's just kind of a reality of, averages and math and percentages. So it's really important that you guys get your grade up as high as you can before you go into that provincial exam. And if you're over the 62.5%, 63% magic number, Literally, the provincial exam won't have any effect. Well, I shouldn't say it won't have any effect on your grade, but you're not going to fail the course. It's impossible to fail if you have over 63 or 62.5% going into that final. So that's kind of a reality of where we're at. I've offered you guys, as it says behind me here, if you want to rewrite a unit test, you just send me some stuff that you've done, review, additional questions, whatever. Say, hey, Mr. Borden, this is some of the work I've done to prepare. You can come in for help. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, there'll be myself and Mrs. Parker, both be here, kind of back and forth between the two of us for some extra help. We'll have some help for sure on tomorrow, and then the following Wednesday as well, that you can come in for help both those days. And depending on need, if you need some other stuff done, any other time, we can probably arrange some other time. How much do our tests count for? Is it worth it to rewrite one? Yeah, it just depends on well, I shouldn't say it depends on the test. All of your tests are equal. I don't, off the top of my head, know how much they're worth. I'd say probably about 5% of your grade, maybe around there, give or take a few percent, would be how much your tests are worth. So it's the difference between a letter grade for some people, then definitely worth doing. And it's good review. It's good to bring your grade up. If you had the opportunity, you'd be crazy not to take it. And again, I'm not gonna, if you rewrite a test, you've showed me you've done a bunch of additional work to relearn the material or whatnot, or done some corrections or things like that. And then you go rewrite the test and, the first time you got 15 and then the second time you get 14. I'm not going to say, well, now you get 14. No, I'm just going to take the higher of the 2 marks. There's absolutely no sort of nothing that can harm you in terms of rewriting a test. So you can only, improve your mark, assuming you do better. So I'm going to leave that offer out there. So again, we need to get your grades up. If you're struggling a little bit right now, you need to finish the course. You have 2 weeks to do so. Once you get all your work done, we can look at your grade and say, hey, maybe it's worthwhile to write a test to get up to that, 73 or, above the 63% little threshold there. And we'll go from there. A couple other things. I found a provincial exam that I would like us to go through together, and it is down in the very last unit. So, the very bottom of the course says prepare, and there is this getting ready for your provincial exam. So a bunch of stuff. This practice exam A, this is just taken right off the ministry website, and this is practice exam A. We looked at it really quickly the Monday after the break, so a week ago, and I never really did much more with it. The answers are online. So you can go and look at that, or go to the ministry site and look at the answers, and you can review that. I have an exam that I have here that this one isn't on the ministry website. So we're going to go through this probably tomorrow and the next day as just a nice way of reviewing. So I will go through that kind of question by question, and then once we've gone through it, I'll post up the answers. So if you want to just have a quick look at that, maybe tonight or tomorrow or whenever, that's there. There's some stuff about reviewing for the provincial exam, how to effectively use your time to review, provincial review booklet, ministry information about provincials, and then another practice exam. This one at the very bottom, this practice exam is actually a kind of a test built into Moodle, like all the ones you've done so far. I'll probably get you guys to write that sometime next week at the end of the week. So don't really worry about that right now. So this is kind of where we're at in terms of review. I've said it a million times and I'll say it a million times more. You guys should definitely be reviewing now. Abby's asking, which one's the checklist? I'm pretty sure the final exam topic study guide is the questions, all of those, that little checklist that I made for you guys. And I'm glad you brought that up, Abby. So, final exam topic study guide. Now that we're kind of in review mode, I would like you guys to do this sheet, and I'll create a spot in Moodle where you can hand it in tomorrow. And again, it's just kind of a good way for you to look at the entire course and just be honest with yourself. I'm not going to, grade it and say, well, you didn't learn Unit 1, Section 5, 0. No, I'm just interested to know that you've gone through this and you've looked at it, you've identified some areas where you need some more review, and sections which you need to review more, and that is a good way to kind of focus your studying. And of course, the material we've just done, in Unit 7 and 8, solving systems of equations, and then the trig that we've just finished, you probably won't spend as much time reviewing that stuff because we just did it. So if you're thinking back, well, as soon as you get back into kind of like Unit 6, now we're getting into slope, parallel, perpendicular lines. This is getting a little bit more vague. Probably don't remember it as well. Then back to Unit 5, domain and range functions. That was a pretty straightforward unit. Unit 4 was factoring. That was a tough one, and that was a while ago now. That was just at the end of, or middle of November, I guess. So as you kind of look back further in the material, things probably aren't quite as clear. So there's that. The other thing we need to look at in the course is final exam review package at the bottom of Unit 8. And this is kind of the review that I'll be going over in the next few days. So the final exam review package is that, I guess it's called the final exam sort of study guide. Now, I'm calling it midterm 2. It's kind of like an in-class final. I don't know what you want to call it. Doesn't really matter. But this is what it looks like. Final study guide. There we go. I mentioned this yesterday. It's about 10 pages. And it covers all the material all the way back to the beginning of the year. So maybe I'll just spend a little bit of time going through a few of these questions today, and then I'll give you guys a few minutes to do some work, and then you can come back with some questions of your own. So before I begin going through the final review learning guide, does anybody have any questions that are pressing? They want me to go through anything that they're uncertain of? Anything regarding grades or final exam or midterm or whenever, whatever. Are we allowed to use our notes stuff like the learning guides? I assume you're talking while you're going through the final exam sort of a review package. Yeah, I want you to use everything at your disposal. Whatever you need, videos, notes, learning guides, by all means. It's kind of a review to refresh your memory. I don't want you to think of it as a test. There'll be lots of other, tests and quizzes along the way that will help you review. But I want you guys to look at your old notes, look at the old videos if you need to go back and relearn something. You'd be so surprised now that you've gone through the entire course how, when you look back at a unit like Unit 1 or 2, something we did a very long time ago and a topic you might have struggled with at the time, you'll go back and you'll look at it and you'll be like, oh my goodness, how is it that I didn't understand this at the time? It's so easy, or something just clicks, or you learned it along the way and now you go back and you can apply it to some of the beginning material that we've done. It's just one of those things. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit about some of this review stuff, and then I'll give you guys some time to look through the material and the learning guide, and then maybe ask any questions you're unsure of. Typically, students will always have the same sorts of questions. When should we rate one of the tests? I'm just wondering, because I feel like there's a lot to do and I don't want to be rushed. Yeah, I think it's kind of overwhelming right now because I'm throwing all this stuff at you. We have this learning guide, and then next Monday you have your midterm, and then we have practice tests and this and that. It's 2 weeks, so we do have a lot of time. And then your exams, a few days into the following week. I think for now, Taylor, you should definitely focus on reviewing for the midterm exam on Monday. And then once that's done, you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to get anything out of the way if you want to rewrite a test. So I would definitely focus on that, the midterm exam that's coming up. And then From there, you can write any tests you want. The next 2 weeks will be all review. Yeah, I don't have any new material to teach you. That's why me just sitting here doing questions isn't probably the best use of your time. It's important that you guys ask questions on things you don't understand, because I'm very good at Math 10. Well, not very good. I'm good. I make some mistakes here and there. You guys help me out with that. But it's up to you guys now, because I've already written the math provincial exam. You guys need to. It's your turn. So real number system and radicals we did back in Unit 1. And I guess this was one of the sections where there was kind of vocab associated with math, which kind of seems weird. Normally you think of vocabulary as maybe like social studies, science type of idea. But we have all these different numbers. We have natural numbers, whole numbers, integers, rational, and irrational. And we need to go back and either refresh our minds or relearn the definitions of these things. When we say a natural number, what is that? When we say a whole number, what is that? What do those numbers include? So maybe I'll refresh your memories real quick. Natural numbers are things like 1, 2, 3, all the way counting up. A whole number was a little bit different. We called a whole number because it included 0, 1, 2, 3. And then integers added another dimension to our number system. All of a sudden we throw in negative numbers. So -1, we could have -2, 0, 1, 2. Rational numbers can be written as a fraction, m over n. These are things like terminating decimals, anything that can be written in a form of a fraction. And irrational numbers are numbers that go on forever. So these are things like pi, square root of 2, and so on and so forth. So those were the real number system. Those were the sort of pieces that fell into the real number system. And there's always a question on the provincial exam that asks you to identify something along the lines of the real number system. So they can ask lots of different things. So that was kind of the first section. I'm not going to go through these. There's answers at the back. I'll just kind of give you hints as to how to do some of the questions, and I'll give you guys some time to work through them. Place the numbers on the number line. That's pretty straightforward. I would convert everything to a decimal probably. Once you have everything in a decimal form, then you can go from there. Yeah, sorry Taylor, the formatting thing is still plaguing me and my PDF files. So if there's nothing there, don't worry about it. It's not going to make or break your studying. Simplifying radicals was something we did where we had the largest perfect squares or perfect cubes that went into the numbers. So when we think about this, we're thinking about numbers like 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared 16, 5 squared 25, and so on. And then you're figuring out which one of those goes into 108. What is the largest perfect square that goes into 108? This one's a little bit different. We have to break down our variables into how many m squareds are there, how many n squareds are there. And we can pull them out of the bracket or out of the radical based on that. Kind of breaking it down. These are all similar to the ones we did above. Simplifying radicals, so this is kind of like combining like terms. We've dealt with this with polynomials. If we had like 2x plus 3x, how many x's do we have? Well, we had 2 groups and another 3 groups, so we have 5 groups. Same goes for here. When we do something like this, we're looking for radicals that are the same. So once I have radicals that are the same, I can combine them. If I have 3 groups of root 2, And then I assume this is minus 6 groups of root 2. Well, how many groups of root 2 do I have? Well, I had 3, I lost 6, so I have negative 3 groups of root 2. And then I have 4 groups of root 3 and another 1, so I have 5 groups of root 3. And I think Abby is on the right track here. For adding radicals, the radical has to be the same for everything that's being added. Yeah, so we can't, if I had something like 2 root 3 plus 5 root 2, I can't add those things together. My radical isn't the same, so that's as simple as that gets. There's nothing I can do to further simplify that. The thing under the radical sign must be the same. If it's not the same, I can't combine it. Just like this, if I had 2x plus 3y, well, I can't combine those. If I had 2x plus 3x, well, now I have the same thing, so that's going to give me 5x's. So the rules that we dealt with for radicals are the same as the rules we dealt with for polynomials. You just need to remember how that works. Letter B, I guess the hint here would be to simplify first. Once you've simplified, like this, then you can combine them. So I'm thinking, okay, what's the largest perfect square that goes into 18? Well, I can break the 18 into 9 times a 2. And I can do the same thing for 32 and the same thing for 54. So this would be 2 times 3 root 2 or 6 root 2. So that's just the first one. You have to do the same process with the other two. Simplify them first and then add them. I have a feeling you're going to end up with a bunch of root 2's and eventually you can add them. One thing about the way the course was set up was we did radicals before we did polynomials, which in my opinion I wouldn't do it that way again, but that's just the way the course was set up. So when we were multiplying radicals, we didn't really fully understand FOIL and the distributive principle or feeding the chickens. So now that you've spent a bunch of time dealing with the polynomial versions of these types of questions, you might go back and find that it's all of a sudden a lot easier to deal with the radical version. So the example here is root 3 times 2 root 6. What you're going to do is multiply the root 3 by both things in the bracket. And when we multiply our radicals, we multiply whatever's under the radical sign by whatever's under the radical sign. So I have 2 here out front, so I'm going to leave the 2. Root 3 and root 6, 3 times 6 is 18. And then I'm going to have 3 times 3 and 8 is 24. Once I've done that, now I need to simplify and then combine any like terms. So by multiplying the radicals, I'm multiplying the things under the radical signs. Same here. I need to simplify probably first, and then when I'm dividing, I can divide whatever's under my radicals, as long as they're both under a radical sign. So those were our radicals. Measurement, we need to use the formula sheet. And it's there for a reason. I printed another one off because I don't know where I put mine. So use your formula sheet. All of the conversions are at the top. You have rulers on the sides. You have algebra tiles, you have the Pythagorean theorem, you have all your trig identities. It's all here, free of charge. So formulas for shapes and things like that. Make sure you use your formula sheet. Conversions, show your units. It's important to set them up properly. Reading a caliper. Some of us, it was just like, boom, I understand how to read a caliper. And then others, you're like, I still don't get it. There will be a caliper question on your exam. That's 1 mark out of 60. It's a pretty easy mark. When you consider some of the more difficult questions that'll be thrown at you, it's worth learning how to do it. So if you are unsure, you need to go back. There's a simulator in the course. I'll give you this little reminder. You need to look at where the 0 is here, and that is how many, this looks like it's in millimeters, I would assume, how many millimeters you have. So where are we at? Well, we're at right here, which is 14 millimeters. So that's the first thing. So you have 14 millimeters. And then you look at the decimal, and this one's nice enough to even identify right here. You get a little red arrow. It says this is the one that's lined up. So to get your decimal, you have, in this case, 6, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So where is it lined up? So it looks like it's 14.6 something. 6, I would guess. If you are still unsure of how that works, you need to spend some time reviewing it. It's 1 mark. It's an easy mark. Probably one of the easier marks on the test. There you go. Alex, you had a question. Can you go over number 11, page 2? Yep, I'll definitely do that. And the course says test will mostly be units 8. Is that midterm 2 of the provincial? That is midterm 2. The provincial exam will be even breakdown of all of the units. I shouldn't say that. Some units are a little more heavily tested than others, but it's not enough to like say, oh, all of the tests is going to be on unit 2. No. So for your provincial exam, it's everything equally. For your midterm next Monday, it's going to be 75% on units 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then about a quarter of it, or 25%, will be units 1 through 4. So it'll be kind of leaning heavily towards the second half of the course. Hopefully that answers your question. Determine the surface area and volume of this cone. Now, nearly every question had to do with a slant height. So remember, you're going to have to use the Pythagorean theorem, almost guaranteed. So don't confuse height with slant height. These are different things. Now, I don't know, there's some difficult questions they can ask about volumes and surface areas, but generally speaking, they're not going to try to trick you. They just want to make sure you're able to look at the formula sheet and figure out the shape you're dealing with and, do a problem. Generally speaking, they're 2-step problems, and they can ask you kind of weird things like what's the lateral area, so you need to know things like that. And Alex, yeah, you get a formula sheet for your provincial. There'll be one waiting for you when you sit down, as well as the midterm next week. So that's kind of one thing to be aware of, slant height and height. A sphere has a diameter. Again, we're kind of trying to trick you with diameter, so just be aware of that. Radius is half the diameter. You guys are good with stuff like that. And that kind of ends the first 2 units, 1 and 2. Exponents. This is a section where students generally struggle. I'd probably say if you understand how to factor, the exponent laws is the most difficult section of the entire course. That's just my opinion. You might find exponent laws easy, but generally speaking, students find them difficult. So you need to know your exponent laws. When I multiply, what do I do with my exponents? When I divide, what do I do with my exponents? When I have a negative exponent, what does that mean? How do I convert from a radical to an exponent? How do I go from an exponent back to a radical? These are all of these rules that you guys probably kind of vaguely remember, but not really clear on. You need to go back and relearn them. So I could write them all down, but I'm not going to, because you guys should go back and figure them out. I'll probably end up doing a bunch of these questions for you because they can get a bit tricky. And it looks like we're having some formatting issues, so I'll see if I can figure out what all that stuff's supposed to look like. So I'm just going to leave the exponent stuff for now. You should go back and learn your exponent laws and applications of them. Now, polynomials section is a good one because it's probably something that you've seen a lot of in terms of you talk about polynomials all the way through, Math 7, 8, you're kind of you're getting used to seeing all these polynomials. So generally speaking, students do well on the polynomials type questions, which is good. Taylor, you don't have the little boxes, just looks like it's all positive. Just do the problems as if they're all positive then, I guess. I don't know if it's messing up the formatting when I import it into OneNote or if it's in the course or where the formatting issue is coming from. But I'm going to see if I can go back and figure out what all of that stuff looks like and then maybe figure out a way to get it to you so you don't have to deal with the formatting. Multiplying polynomials. This kind of goes back to the idea I mentioned before when we were expanding our radicals. You need to know how to multiply. Now we're doing the same thing with polynomials now. I have to distribute through the brackets. This negative 4y squared needs to be distributed through these brackets. Then you can combine like terms. And then you go from there. This was kind of a FOIL. I know it's not a FOIL type situation, but basically every term in the first bracket needs to be multiplied by every term in the second bracket. Once you've done that, you need to combine like terms and see what you end up with. Factoring. I don't know why we put such a big emphasis on factoring, but we do. And it's important that you remember how to do it. So I'll give you a couple steps here. First thing you should do is look for common factors. Is there anything that's common in all three terms? For example, this first question, I could pull out a 3. 3 goes into 3, 3 goes into 15, 3 goes into 18. This is a really evil question to ask you as a first factoring question because they've put the negative out front as well. So that's a tricky one to start with. There were kind of two different factoring type problems. There was factoring with nothing in front of the first term, and then there's factoring with something in front of the first term. This one confuses things by throwing a y squared at the end. Should be the same sort of process. It's going to be a difference of squares, I could imagine. How do I know? Well, I see a negative sign. It's a binomial. There's only two terms. First thing I'm going to do is look for common factors. In this case, I'm going to pull out a 5. So that was factoring. That 3 questions involving factoring questions, that's not enough to review factoring. There are so many different things that can happen in factoring type questions. You can have a number in front of your x squared term or your first term, and you have to use the AC method and break down the middle term. That method's going to work for every factoring problem. Do you remember how to do it? Do you remember the quick way how to factor? There's just so many different things you can run into in terms of factoring, so many different types of questions. It's important to not think that this one question on your review is going to cover you for all the factoring questions. It won't. I'm not saying factoring questions are out there to get you, but there's just so many different things we can ask. Graphing. Generally speaking, students do really well in the graphing unit. And that's a good thing because we do graphing, then we do slope, and there's a lot of stuff revolving around graphs. And you guys are good at reading graphs and you're good at understanding graphs. So another kind of benefit to this is we've done this recently. This was, just before the winter break, we did graphing, Unit 5 stuff. You need to know how to do all these things. What's the difference between a function and a relation? Circle the following, which represents a linear relation. Well, that's like, questions like that will come up on your test. It's an easy mark. That is the easiest mark you're going to see on your provincial exam. If you can write it in the form of y is mx plus b, it's linear. If you cannot write it in that form, then it is not linear. Even though something like this, y is negative 3, it's not necessarily in the form y is mx plus b, but really it's just missing this mx term. So it is in that form. So be careful, just don't think, well, I don't have, any x term. Basically, y is negative 3 is going to be a horizontal line. So do you remember what that looks like? How do you represent a linear relation on a graph? Graph the equation using the x-intercept and the y-intercepts. How do I find x-intercepts? How do I find y-intercepts? We did this type of thing in 2 units. We did it in Unit 5 and Unit 6, both had x and y-intercepts. It's an important topic, so guarantee you on your provincial exam, you're going to see an x and y-intercepts question. Either plotting a graph or looking at a graph, looking at an equation, what's the x-intercept, looking at an equation, what's the y-intercept. So you need to go back and review how to find those things. Linear relations. Again, same sort of stuff we just dealt with. Find the slope and y-intercept of the graph, write the equation. These get a little tricky. I mean, some of these are hard. Determine the slope and coordinates of a point. This section, it's important to use your formula sheet because your formula sheet has the 3 forms of lines. We had slope point, we had slope intercept, and then we had general form. And again, these are all on the formula sheet, but it doesn't say on the formula sheet which one is which. So you need to be able to identify the difference between the 3 types of lines that you can encounter. It's just one of those things. It's there, but you just need to understand it. Perpendicular parallel lines, linear systems. One thing that's not on this review is, and I think Abby brought it up in chat here, the only hard thing with graphs is domain and range with signs and numbers because it's easy to get them wrong. It is. So one thing that's not on here is domain and range. I don't know why it's not on here, but it's not. So you should definitely review that. It's kind of one of these things. I guarantee you there'll be a domain and range question on your provincial exam. It's 1 mark. And you're thinking, well, Mr. Bourne, it's 1 mark. I don't really know how to do domain and range. I can just say, hey, forget it, and I'll just get that one wrong, or I'll have a good guess at it, maybe get a 25% chance of answering it correctly. Well, it's easy to say that, but now if we think of, okay, I didn't understand how to do that, and I didn't understand the exponent law stuff, so now there's another 5 questions, and you think like 3 or 4 topics you don't understand how to do, and now all of a sudden you're up to 10, 15 questions. That's a quarter of your exam right there that you've just given up on. So I know it would be amazing if everybody understood every concept going into the exam, and students do get 100% on this exam all the time, but don't say, well, I don't know how to do that, I'm just going to give up that mark. That's not a good way to think about this. And that 1 mark could be not necessarily the difference between A and a B. For some of you, it could be the difference between passing the course and failing the course. So there's more at stake than that for some people. If you have a high grade going to the exam, yeah, it could be the difference between an A or a B, or it could be the difference between a letter grade. Provincial is multiple choice-ish. The first 12 questions are no calculator, multiple choice. The last 5 or 6 questions are kind of fill in the boxes with numbers. So we talked about it a little before, and we'll look at it again probably tomorrow. Find the slope and the intercept. Super easy marks if stuff like that comes your way. Linear systems. Now, we just did systems of equations before the break. Remember, solve a system of equations. Where the lines intersect is the solution. So, I guess I could write that. Where lines intersect is the solution. That's what we're looking for. Those lines can intersect at one point, they can be parallel and not intersect, or they can be collinear on top of one another and intersect at every point, so there can be infinite solutions. Those are the 3 scenarios we ran into. We looked at graphing, we looked at solving by elimination, solving by substitution, and those were the ways that we could solve these systems. So if we have a question like this, clearly it wants us to graph. That's an easy way to solve it. Again, linear systems, there was a lot more to it than just one question. So don't think, oh, well, I know how to graph those 2 lines and found the intersection point, I'm done. There's a lot more to it than that. You have parallel lines, you have perpendicular lines, one solution, no solutions, infinite solutions. There's a lot going on here, not summed up in that one question. Trig. Some of us have written the Unit 8 test. Generally, the marks are high on the Unit 8 test, which is a good thing. And again, there's 2 questions involving trig. You guys know there's a lot more to trig than that. So I'll probably take a break here, for me at least. And I would like you guys, now that you've gotten kind of a little bit of an overview of what's kind of happening on this final exam learning guide, I'd like you guys to take some time and go through some questions. I don't care what questions you go through. Alex already asked a question. I will go through as many of them as necessary. I don't want to do them all, though, because it is up to you guys now. I can do them. If you are asking a question, I want you to be honest with yourself. Did you go back and look up the learning guide or the lesson that you did that stuff in? Or did you just look at it and say, I don't remember how to do that. I'm going to get Mr. Bourne to do it for me. I know how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, you need to go back, see if you can learn it on your own. If you can't, then ask. So don't just say, well, I don't remember this. Can you go through it? It is up to you guys now. I'm going to say it a million times before we're done the course. It's up to you to review. I like how that kind of rhymes a little bit too. And then, is there a topic that comes up a lot like a unit? No, it's evenly spread out through everything, the provincial exam. And there's things like they'll always ask a domain and rate question. They'll always ask a number systems question. As you start looking at exams, old exams, and start going through them, you'll notice that there's a pattern to how the types of questions that come up. They're always going to ask the same questions. They just kind of, reword them, renumber them, rewrite them. And there's nothing that I can say is guaranteed to come up. But generally speaking, there'll always be a few of certain types of questions. And it's just kind of the luck of the draw depending on what you get. So it's 10 to 10. We have till about 10:20. So maybe put up 20 minutes on the timer. And that'll take us to 10 after 10. And that'll give me about 10 minutes to go through some problems you guys had. I would, again, like you to come across something you don't understand. Go back, look, see if you can rewatch a video, see if you can review. I know I'm giving you 20 minutes. It's not enough time to go through this whole review, but pick something you don't know how to do, didn't learn, maybe need to start reviewing. Try to do a few questions and ask if you're confused or if you can't find any solutions or things like that. So we'll put 20 minutes up. See you guys back at 10 after 10.